So we're rolling. Hello,
Hello.
Andy.
Yeah.
Uh, how are you, buddy?
Oh, pretty good. Just hanging out. Another day at it. Just coming on here, talk about some stuff, see where this goes. I'm excited. It's always fun to have have some conversations about things and just explore a little bit. I think there's a lot of value in having conversations
For
and
sure.
seeing how other people's ideas and opinions and just fleshing things out in our collective knowledge and tended to get a beat on it a little bit. I think that's fun to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you have a YouTube channel by the name of 2Tasty.
Yes, correct.
So why don't you take a little bit of time, talk about the channel, talk about what you do there, how you got started, and how it's going, and maybe ultimately the future of it, what you see for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I on YouTube, Too Tasty. I run a comics and manga based channel, so we talk about a lot of, especially, new comic releases. We talk about some new manga releases, some old manga, just kind of everything in that sphere. I also do a show slash podcast available on Spotify called Graphic Discussions,
Hmm.
where I take someone that is just into comics or just into manga, and I have them read the opposite, and then we
Oh,
sit and talk
cool.
about it.
Okay.
So, I think it's good because as someone, me personally, I started mostly, grew up on Toonami, so anime,
Mm,
and got into manga, and then
same.
recently in the last, year and a half, all of us millennials did, right?
Yeah. Almost,
And
almost
then,
all of us. Yeah.
yeah, for sure, it's nostalgic. It's a comfort spot. But then about a year and a half ago, I started getting into, Western comics. Um, After kind of fighting the urge to do it for a while. I just didn't think there was anything good in there. And then now that I've dove in, I've realized that there is peak fiction on both sides, and a lot
Yeah.
of people
Yeah.
only hide to one side or the other. So I started my graphic discussions to help kind of bridge the gap between the two sides. When I kind of what spurred it on is when I first started getting into comic YouTube just as a observer and just watching videos, and you watch things you like on YouTube like
Mm.
everybody does. And a lot of the videos I saw initially were very much, it was in the heat of 2020 with comics versus manga.
Mm.
Manga's destroying comic sales, and there was all those
Yeah.
really rage baity things out there. And I was like, man, but like, I mean, yeah, manga's probably more profitable and popular mainstream in the US, but at the same time, like, comics are kind of the OG. We had the
Yeah.
the height of the MCU at that point. So I wanted to see what it was all about and to see if it really was just garbage, because my algorithm threw me down the manga over comics kind of argument about it. And now that I've really got in and had a chance to really explore both sides, again, there's just
Mm.
awesome stories and fiction and characters on both spectrums, and I'm just so happy to introduce people to the other side a little bit.
So I have a question for you. I had this realization the other day, and it was actually something that I heard. Oh God, who was it? Somebody was talking about Dostoevsky and how one of the reasons that he's such a prophetic author is because of his ability to encapsulate the struggle of light and dark within an individual character, whereas a lot of other writers might split that up and personify the light in one character and personify the darkness in a different character. What
Yeah.
he's able to do is have that battle rage within any one of his characters that he's writing. And so I was thinking about that specifically in reference to like why people seem to gravitate more towards Batman than Superman.
Right.
And so I wanted to ask you, like with that in mind, I think that idea plays a big part as to why Batman is more alluring because he's not so you know rigid.
Yeah.
He kind of walks that line. So with your knowledge of like peak fiction, as you describe it, um, would you say that something like that plays a role in making a more engrossing narrative or more more enjoyable story for the reader?
Yeah, I kind of two sides to this. I do think that characters where an author is talented enough to build both aspects into the same character can be really interesting and fascinating. And
Mm,
I think that says something in its own right. And
mm,
as a on a surface level, I definitely see why people gravitate toward Batman more. He's a little edgier, a little
yeah,
darker. A
yeah,
lot of people look at Superman as, white bread, goody two
yeah,
shoes,
yeah,
kind of basic. And I used to think that as well
yeah.
until I like read a Superman comic, and you realize that. So I don't mean to go on a rant, but
No, do
Superman
it.
is
Go
like
ahead. Go. We've
one of
got
my
time,
favorite
man. Get into
heroes.
it. Get into it.
So Superman is the greatest hero ever, and I say that because he has to be, because
Hmm.
as the DC world is, they are gods amongst men. Where Batman is again that outlier and is a little edgier and cooler because he's a normal guy that still is able to elevate himself through his wits and his being the world's greatest detective to compete and stay relevant
Mm,
among these, Superman, the Flash, Wonder Woman, literal gods at some point.
mm,
And Superman is so interesting, I think, outside of that surface level analysis because he was, you know, raised here on Earth as a normal human. And because of that, and those instilling values that are the core of his character, because when we look at Superman, a lot of people just look at the tights and cape, but Clark Kent is really the character
hmm.
that is Superman, where, a lot of people like, oh, well, yeah, Bruce Wayne is Batman, but we all look at Batman as the main dude in there.
Right.
Not that his past trauma and the play between Bruce and Batman is not interesting because it is, but Superman's I think is just so perfectly done in the sense of it's Clark that has powers to do this. It's not Superman that also has to daytime as a reporter. And it, Superman again, he's like a god. He's all
Hmm.
powerful. He can see everything, depending on which canon and run and continuity you want to look at. But as a whole, Superman is this omni powerful being, but he still takes time to save a bus that's going to fall over a bridge or save a car that's going to fall over the bridge and make sure he tells the people inside, hey, make sure you wear your seatbelt. You know,
Hmm.
in All Star Superman, which is one of the greatest Superman runs, I think, one of my favorites at least. I mean, it's hard to rank, it's not subjectively, but he takes his time and he's done this multiple times in different runs is there's someone gonna jump off of a building and commit suicide, and Superman takes time to sit and talk with them and like, hey, I know it seems tough, I know the world, it feels like it's against you, I know you're dealing with darkness, but I just want you to know that I'm here for you. I don't think this is how you should do it, but there's two really popular instances where he's like, I'm not going to stop you from doing this, but I'm
Mm,
going to be here with you to try to do that. And I think whenever
mm,
we get that Superman that is that really compassionate, human grounded character, it's the
mm.
absolute best version of Superman. I mean, how many times has Lex Luthor tried to destroy the world and or Metropolis, and Superman doesn't put him down? And it's not necessarily where Batman, it's he has a code because his parents were murdered, and if he crosses that line, he may not be able to come back, and he will look at himself just as worse as the villains he fights.
Hmm.
Where Superman doesn't cross that line because it's not the right thing to do. And that kind of subtle difference in the base of their character is why I think Superman's just such an excellent character, because he comes at things with compassion. While he does throw hands and
That's an interesting point.
awesome battles
Yeah.
and things like that, it's the core, that compassion, that seeing the hope and betterment that humans can be and the potential we all have within ourselves to be great is what Superman really stands for and what makes him so great. And I think that that's just very profound and relative to every person on earth. So that's my take on, Batman might be cooler, but man, Superman means so much more whenever
Hmm.
you spend any time really looking into the character.
Listen, I really appreciate the insight into the character because I haven't spent really any time with anything on the Western side. You know, um, it is funny though. As you're talking, I'm like, oh, okay. So I would describe Batman as lawful good, and I would now describe Superman as neutral good. What do you think about
Yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I like that, a little D&D. Yeah,
Yeah.
Superman, you can
Yeah.
almost, I mean, neutral good, yeah, but I mean, he definitely stays by the letter of the law. Like,
Mm.
if there's a, he's not breaking criminals' arms to try to find out, who their
Yeah.
dealer is.
Yeah.
Where Batman might be a little bit more chaotic good, because Batman, he, again, an interesting thing with Batman is sometimes he will get as close to that villain line as possible
Hmm.
without ever going over. He, out of all the big DC heroes, he's probably the one that gets the closest, but will never cross it,
Yeah.
because if he does, again, he's just as good as the Joker at that point.
Well, I mean, one of the like the ways that I process the difference between like chaotic good, neutral good, lawful good is like if someone has a code, right? That in my mind that immediately puts them in the lawful uh, range.
I see what you're saying, for sure.
So it's I'm sure the whole thing is more of a spectrum than anything else. It's not like you
For
only
sure.
belong in one and you can't cross over to the others. But so I'm sure that there are instances where Batman, especially maybe in his older age, I've heard some stuff about like when he gets older, it
It's a
maybe
little more
trends more,
brutal.
yeah, trends more towards the chaotic side of it. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. It popped into my head while you were talking about that. So I do appreciate the
Yeah.
insight into the characters. So
Oh, for sure.
yeah, yeah. So ultimately, like I did not I didn't spend as much time as I was hoping to, just because it's absolutely insane over here. So, but I did spend a little
Yeah.
a little bit of time digging into the channel, to the 2Tasty channel, and I got maybe 6 minutes into what I think your most recent graphic discussions with added cheese.
Yeah. Great guy, by the way.
So so why don't you talk a little bit about what you see like for the future of the channel, and you
Yeah.
know kind of.
I mean, going forward, it's definitely just kind of a pet passion project. It's nothing,
Okay.
I'm not here to get monetized and be the next big name in it. I
Right.
mean, if that happens, I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But I'm still a fairly small channel, and I just find these topics so interesting, and I just enjoy talking about it. And it's good to have an outlet to talk, and the comic community that I've gotten in with on YouTube is just a
Hmm.
really great group of guys and girls, and a lot of people sending each other free comics all the time, and
Oh, it's
just
awesome.
kind of that sharing of experiences while we all read our favorite medium. And for a long time before, I was really watched a lot of the anime manga community videos, and you don't get that as much sense of community between them,
Hmm.
but we're all there to still and talk and enjoy about what we like. And for the future of my channel, I'd like to just kind of keep doing what I'm doing. I'm trying to branch out a little bit. I recently did more of a video essay type form on villains.
Okay.
And that was a lot of fun to do. I got to push myself with my video editing skills a little bit, which is something I'm definitely still developing. So it was fun to, just sit down and play on the computer for a little bit
Hmm.
and kind of push yourself and try something new. And I'd like to keep doing my graphic discussions because if nothing else, I think it's important for people to hear the other side a little bit, especially after, again, my kind of intro into it was very much West versus East, and that's
Yeah.
how it is, and
Yeah.
one's better than the other, and da 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 da, the other side's trash, and I just don't feel like
I,
conversations like that are very
and
valuable
not on in any realm. Like
in
yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's almost like a like a spillover from the politics realm, that it seems like things are becoming like everything is becoming polarized in that way. In the same way that
Absolutely.
like that I mentioned earlier, that like chaotic good, neutral, and like lawful good aren't, they're a spectrum. They're not, you know, individual things, and you can only be one or the other. That's
Yeah.
pretty much how it is with everything. So like there's good media in Western comics, and there's good media in Eastern comics. It's just a matter of allowing yourself to be open to whatever the experience is.
Yeah,
Completely agree.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and comics does tend to spill a little political sometimes, especially now. Everything's so polarizing
Yeah.
anyway. I know when when I first got in. If you're ready to kind of, we'll go down a rabbit hole here for a little
Sure.
bit, kind of switch gears a bit. When I first started watching a lot of comic YouTubers, my algorithm on YouTube, I actually obviously I made the whole account for 2Tasty to, kind of explore that and define my algorithm so that I'm just getting suggested and watching things that are comics and manga related. So I
Mm,
can have a little bit more streamlined approach. I'm not getting like my, NFL news and all that from my personal account, things like that.
sure.
And as I started to do that, I started to notice that my algorithm slowly kind of went down this more conservative path, which I thought was really
Whoa. Okay.
interesting.
Hold on. Run that by me one more time. I want to make sure I'm
Yeah,
keeping up with what you're
uh,
saying. So,
absolutely. So I made the 2Tasty channel,
yeah.
and because I wanted a fresh algorithm to start with. And
Okay.
as I began exploring more comic book discussion type things, one channel in particular I watched heavily was Comics by Perch, which nothing against him, but a lot of people feel like he's very conservative and has
Mm,
some egregious takes and things like that. But I feel it's pretty middle of the road. But
mm,
and as I started to kind of get into that, other things started to leak into my algorithm a little bit, where we got more outside of comics conservative talking points, um, especially featured around things like, masculinity. We had the whole in comics John Kent Superman run, the previous one where it came out that John Kent was bisexual. And I think that just because I was in YouTube on a fresh algorithm at that time, I started getting suggested a lot of videos that were like, DC's wrecking their comics. How could they
mm,
make Superman gay? Da
mm,
da 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 da. And I think that kind of started to trickle my algorithm into a interesting way that I wasn't expecting.
mm. Interesting.
It was
Yeah.
interesting to ride. So as it started doing that, I just kind of continued down that path a little bit as
Mm.
far as, all right, let's watch these videos. Let's see what other sides have to say, because it's interesting.
Yeah.
Why,
Absolutely.
whether you completely disagree or not with various viewpoints, I think it's good and healthy in order to experience those and have that there. And
Look,
um,
you learn a lot more from the points of view that you disagree with than the ones you
y-
agree with. So, yeah.
especially when you're not consuming it just to argue against it and fight it.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
you're willing to hear it out a little bit, and I
Mm.
know that some people think that's very dangerous to hear out arguably
I've
dangerous
thought about that,
ideals.
but you go ahead.
No, that's okay. Absolutely, yeah. And I think that it is important to be able to hear these points of view and look at it in a more neutral way and
Mm.
then mull on it and develop an opinion afterwards. And
Agreed.
even if that reinforces your own, I think it's important you have to hear the other side out, because as we know here in America, we're very divided,
Yes.
left and right, more than ever,
Yes.
it feels like.
Yeah.
And we're never going to breach that gap if we don't actually listen to the other side. If we're just demonizing the other side constantly,
Mm-hmm.
we're never going to get to a point where we can find any common ground about anything. And that's a scary future that it feels like we're heading down. Ever since
Yep.
Harambe died, I feel like we've been stuck in a parallel universe where things are just ever so slightly getting shittier. And this is where we're at now.
Mm.
But yeah, the jokes aside, we are in a very polarized time, and
Yeah.
again, I thought it was important to hear the other side out, and it took me down quite an interesting algorithm and rabbit hole for the last year and a half.
So, what would you say your insights or your takeaways were from that? Because in your message that you sent me, you mentioned that you sort of stumbled into like the red pill space.
Yes,
So,
I stumbled into the red pill space, and I just went whole hog on consuming it, because I was like, these people are so wildly interesting at times, and
right?
they have
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
interesting on their worldviews, and it was very different from a lot of the things that I believed in my day to day life.
Mm.
as far as how the average person goes about their life and what the average person feels about things. Not that I mean, I grew up in Southern Indiana, which is very much Trump country,
Okay.
not to pull specific politicians into it, because I don't want to necessarily do
No,
that,
but I
but
mean, it's it's
that
it's useful
that
to
vibe,
describe it that way. We know what you mean. So
you
yeah,
guys know what I'm saying.
yeah.
So it's not like I haven't been bathed in more conservative traditional values my whole life.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I feel like always, even since, being in high school and things like that, I always definitely considered myself more liberal, I'm going to say,
Hmm.
as far as, I think that everyone deserves the same opportunity.
Yes.
Everyone should
Yes.
We should try to get everybody to the same starting line
Yes.
and let everyone run their race, because you can't micromanage a country of individuals, but you can at least put in things in order to give everyone a fair shot. And as I got deeper into this red pill ideology, I really began to have some problems with it. And to be open, my background, I did go to school. I got a sociology degree.
Mm.
I worked in social work. I did child services for a number of years,
Mm.
which was a very traumatic, but yet eye-opening and incredible experience to see how, what I'm going to say is, how the other side lives. You hear a lot of
Right.
talking points out there
Right.
about, this is what poor people need. This is what these people need. These are what minorities need. This is what, you know, poor white people need. All the people in this lower socioeconomic status that we like to use as a talking point. It was very good to see how they actually live on a day-to-day basis and realize that we're all just humans trying to make it. We are
Yes.
just in different situations, and how people navigate these situations was extremely enlightening and horribly eye-opening to me,
Mm.
coming from, white middle class. So I got through that. Now close to finishing up nursing school. We're almost there, about a year left. So I've been in healthcare now for a little over 5 years,
Mm.
and that has also been very eye-opening, to see kind of how much a lot of the politics and opinions that we have really start to bleed into healthcare, and
Yep.
see kind of what's on the ground floor. It was fun to be on the fun. I say fun. It
Mm.
was fun to be on the ground floor through COVID, because there was a lot of screaming over the top of a lot of COVID issues. And it was interesting to be on the ground floor to see how an organization and the people that run that organization and work within that organization handle things.
Mm.
So I feel that I have a very grounded approach to a lot of these issues because of my experience. Obviously, I know nothing about finance.
Mm.
So I definitely will admit my blind spots 100%, but kind of that's where I'm coming from through experiencing a lot of the red pill ideology that I was able to absorb over the last, you know, 18 months.
So you said that you had some very specific issues. Is that the right word for it?
Yes, we
Or
call them we
maybe
can call them
points of
issues.
contention? Uh,
Yeah, however
yeah.
spicy you want to get.
Yeah.
I mean, they all mean the same thing more or less.
So do you want to get right into that, or do you want to? Because I had kind of a similar experience, but I think different in um, some, we'll say, meaningful, like meaningful ways. You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Um, to paint some broad strokes about, I guess it's important to define some broad strokes about what I feel is kind of the core of a lot of the red pill ideology that I took in. Um, so there is a positive section in it, as far as there are nuggets of truth, as far
mm,
as a lot of these creators and figureheads of it promote physical wellness,
yeah.
financial wellness.
Yeah.
Um, the term, high value man is thrown around quite a bit.
Mm,
And, what does it look like to be a man in society today?
Hmm.
And I think that there are definitely some baseline points that they hit that really resonate with a lot of people. As far as I know Jordan Peterson isn't really affiliated with Red Pill, per he
Hmm.
says, and really he's more of a modern day philosopher, I guess you can say. Ugh.
Hmm.
But he makes but he always says clean your room,
Hmm.
and I think people hearing hey, you got to take care of yourself and your own well-being before you can, to tie back into more red pill. A lot of the red pill is very much the intersection of dating, sex between males and females,
Hmm.
and so I definitely at first I can see how it draws people in, saying, hey, get your life together, become what what we say is valuable, between these metrics,
Hmm.
and then you can have the life that you want. And I think that isolated is positive, because I mean, obviously
Okay.
physical health is really important. There's a healthcare crisis out there. There's a lot of unhealthy sick people,
Hmm.
that a lot of preventable diseases. Diabetes is skyrocketing. It's really on the rise right now. Just how people take care of their bodies, obesity's high. Like, there are problems that are preventable. And as well, there are a lot of people out there that budget their week to week, paycheck to paycheck finances, and they could do it better. So there are nuggets of truth and honesty that a lot of people, I think, overlook, that is embedded within the red pill.
Hmm.
However, the approach of how it's carried out, and especially what it has devolved into at this point, as very much a guy versus girl,
Hmm.
this is how gender roles are in the real world, as they
Hmm.
say. There's a lot of this is how it is in the world statements,
Hmm.
and this is how all you average guys, even though a lot of the creators, are better off than your standard income of 45K. And it's a lot of the ideals that trickle off of that, and makes a lot of broad assumptions, that I really started beginning to see, like, okay, this is not something I really agree on personally. And I don't think it is the message we need to be putting out to young men, and really young women either. I don't think that we should ban the speech, like I said, because it is
Hmm.
important to see both sides. But I think there are some dangers that they're tipping on, that are that really could lead to be very high, little hyperbole, could lead to a lot of the destruction of family structures, and a lot of negative mental health impacts on young men that could already be struggling with feeling like an outsider,
Hmm.
or having depression and anxiety.
So I think that's the perfect segue for me because I agree with a lot of what you said. But
Yep.
I wanted to make this point earlier, but uh, I also wanted to let you finish. So I'm glad that I let you finish because now I think the
I,
point is more
I appreciate
salient at
that.
this point. Um, for me, pretty much everything is like a baby with the bathwater situation, you know. And so if I'm looking at something, my first response to it, I almost immediately disregard because it's almost useless, right?
Right.
There's something to be said, I think, for intuition, and so it's like I don't throw it out completely, but I set it to the side. Very like I'm pretty strict about that. I'm like, okay, those are my initial responsive feelings. I'm gonna put those to the side and like actually engage with the material to see what's being said.
Hmm.
And so maybe maybe I'm unique in that sense that I'm like that seems to be something that I'm pretty good at, which is troubling, and that's a different conversation on its own. But it's like if you're afraid, and not you specifically, but us as a culture is afraid that our media is going to be poisoning the minds of our youths, then the issue lies with the way that we're educating our youths. Because you should be able to tell the difference between, as Terrence McKenna said, between like shit and shinola. Like you should be able to tell. right? If you can't tell, then that's not the problem of the people who are creating and trying to sell you shit. That's, if you're an adult, that's on you. But if you're a child, it's on the society that hasn't raised you to be intellectually astute enough to be able to make that distinction on your own. So I don't think censorship of speech, really of any kind, like I'm sure there's a line there, right? But I don't think that's the answer, because you're not addressing really what the root is. And so if you're susceptible to bullshit, well, just, I don't know, like removing some bullshit channels from YouTube isn't going to save you from the bullshit. It's going to find a different way into your life. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things that I actually think is very beneficial about the red pill space, is because they preach 100% accountability. It's absolutely on you to improve your life. And I think that's very beneficial, especially for young men to hear. What I don't think is all that beneficial is that they only promote one mode of like, oh, you have to become a high value man. You have to have, this much money. You have to adopt these values. It's like, no, you don't actually. You don't, like, if you don't feel like dealing with a whole bunch of women, that doesn't make you less of a man. Right. So, correct. But so I think that's not that aspect of it where there's really only one option, right? And it's to get to the top of this very specific realm of experience, culturally, materialistically, however you want to frame it. That's not very helpful, but there's a lot in it that is. So like, I say, I've actually never said it out loud, so this is the first time. But the red pill saved my marriage. Legitimately, it saved my marriage. Like specifically Rollo Tomasi and his podcast. Because when my daughter was born, our first daughter, there was a shift in my wife. And for the life of me, I could not figure out what had happened. And so I'm at my wit's end. Like I'm legitimately committing, like planning, self-deletion, we can say, right? Like I'm at rock bottom. And it was like the next day, a video pops up in my feed. And it was a very similar experience, I think, to you. It was like completely the opposite of everything that I had believed, everything that I had been told about the culture and the programming and all that stuff. And it was just like, what? And I had to very like diligently repress my own almost like a disgust response from what I was hearing to because it can be very abrasive. Like if you're not ready for it, if you have no idea like what the space is, it's very abrasive, especially the first time you hear it. So, but yeah. I was kind of in, I was at the end of my rope, man. I didn't have anywhere else to go. And it's like, look, at least this sounds different from all of the other stuff that I've been trying. And so as I dug more into it, the idea that you as a man are responsible for your own needs, right? I think that was really the turning point for me. And so that actually led me to reading No More Mr. Nice Guy, which again, like probably the most influential book that I've ever read in my life on taking control of my life. But the whole thing boils down to being able to be like stoic in your emotional state. And I realized that the reason my wife had changed, right, was because I honestly, I hadn't been doing the work. I hadn't been keeping up with like developing myself. I hadn't been working out. I hadn't been, I had very little ambition But most of all, it's like any little thing really just sent my emotional state into chaos. And even though I would dissociate from that, and so the actions like wouldn't betray how I was feeling, like my wife was still picking up that I was off, pretty much every minute of the day. And once I got that in order, once I figured out how to maintain my own like emotional stability,
Hmm.
everything got better, like basically overnight. And it's been that way pretty much ever since. So, I still listen to the red pill stuff every once in a while, but it's more for entertainment at this point. I don't feel like that there's anything else that well, actually that's not entirely true because I feel like I have a unique perspective on it because it's like there actually is opportunity to utilize the insights that are present in the red pill space but offer a different avenue for people.
Yeah,
That's not just you got to be top G and that's the only acceptable application of this whole thing, right? It's not. It's not.
definitely.
So, like, life's a lot more fun, and you don't need a whole bunch of like mansions and supercars to make it fun.
Absolutely. Or just to, be a functioning, healthy human.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Because I like what you said, and I'm glad that finding, you know, stoicism a little bit and
mm.
kind of some of the teachings that, the red pill feeds into with that it helped you out. That's awesome to hear,
Mm.
man. That really is. Like I love hearing and seeing people's dubs
Mm.
because, we're all just humans. We're all in this together. Like, why not pick up some dubs along the way?
Yeah,
I like that. Yeah, I agree with, what you're saying. Definitely. What kind of like what I said was, there's good in it. There's good nuggets of wisdom within it. My problem comes with, I think that a lot of it is drenched in, I hate to use buzzwords, but a little bit of toxic masculinity. And I hate that I have to use that word because it's such a poisoned and
mm.
overused phrase anymore that I don't think gets used in the right way. I feel like it gets more just to get under people's skin
Yeah,
as opposed to kind of stepping back and saying like, okay, so what's toxic about it? And kind of looking into,
right.
kind of behind the scenes on it a little bit. And I guess that's the big issue that I've come with it is it's just kind of drenched in an unhealthy way to go about your day-to-day life at times, especially how a lot of these podcasts like Fresh and Fit is a good example
Mm.
of how they just constantly degrade women, basically saying you guys don't have value. And a lot of the red pill is just pearly things. I mean, a
Mm.
lot of these big tubers are very much like, well, women shouldn't vote. They should be at home taking care of the kids and cleaning my house. I cover all the bills, and that's the relationship. And I feel like that is a very unhealthy way of looking at things, especially for your average man, that your average family that, both people have to go to work.
Mm.
It should be a team effort. I'm very
Yeah,
much on, you know, like you, I'm married. I have two kids. Both me and my wife work because we have to.
mm.
It's even if we didn't have to, why would you not, for the average person, double your income more or less?
Mm.
For the betterment of your household, the betterment of your child's future. And I think that by some of these more specific Red Wing talking points, like the man has to be this definition of masculine. This is what goes into masculine. You're not emotional. You pay for everything. You find a woman with a low body count or a virgin. You
So
marry them
okay,
before their
I mean,
value runs out at 25, like that kind of
can,
stuff.
so
And
can I stop you there?
absolutely.
And this is where I think we tend to agree. Actually, I don't think that the they do a very good job of contextualizing why they're saying the things that they're saying, right? So if you watch something like Fresh and Fit, which I've watched a fair bit of, they're not talking to the average guy, right? They're talking
Correct.
to the top, maybe 5-10% of guys who are still struggling with women.
Yeah.
And so they're talking to like the hyper masculine subsection of the male population. And when you understand that, at least for me, I was able to take basically everything with a grain of salt. So it's like I'm married. I'm happy in my marriage. My wife respects me. I respect her. We work as a team, but we each have our roles, and we have a lot of fucking fun. Like our life is
Yeah.
fun. Like I don't need to like, good lord, dealing with one woman is enough work. Okay, I'm all good. I'm good. I don't need the whole like I need to go find other women to bang on the side. That's not me. I don't need
Yeah.
that. Um, Plus my wife's hot and she's a lot of fun. So it's like,
Nice.
but and that's why I say that like the picture that they present is one of the issues that I have with it, because it's like this is the only way. It's not. It's not.
Right.
Like feel and actually interestingly enough, this is one of the reasons why I kind of dig um anime as much as I do, because they do represent different like a different perspective on what it means to be masculine. I just caught up on Demon Slayer, and I think Tanjiro. I'm actually working on a video about him because like his sense of accountability is it's absolutely unparalleled. Like most protagonists in anime have like an unshake like I guess the shonen anime, they have like an unshakable sense of accountability, but I think he takes it to the next level. And it's interesting for him as a character because that's kind of all he's got going. Like the other aspects of his personality seem kind of flat. And I thought he was boring until until like the end of the third season, when I don't know, spoiler alert, I guess, if you haven't finished it, but when he
Yeah.
cuts off
I'm
the
finished.
what
Yeah, I'm finished. You're
you
good.
okay, so when he cuts off the upper four head and he's like, atone for your sins with your life, right? So he became in that moment the arbiter of judgment towards another being. And it's like he wouldn't have been able to get there if his sense of his accountability and of his sense of responsibility wasn't as deeply ingrained as it is. And I think the whole show was kind of like set up for that moment to be not just believable, but organic to the character. And it's like that is also another way to be a man. That's another way to be a man.
For sure.
So, like I said, I think we agree about a lot of like the red pill space, um, and the maybe even our points of contention are more similar. So, I get it. There, part of the problem too is that like the shock value of like the shows like the Fresh and Fit, I think like whatever is like that, or just Pearly Things is also like that. Anything Andrew Tate is
Yeah.
involved in is like that. So because it's just the way that we are, I think as humans, the more polarized you are, the more attention you attract, both positive and negative. And so I'm actually reminded of something that Alan Watts said, that a philosopher. If you don't know, he was a philosopher in the 1960s, 1970s. But he said that philosophers in the past who were very moderate in their approach were regarded and respected for their moderate their moderated, or their ability to be moderate, but they're never remembered for it. And so
Yeah.
if you want to make a splash, you have to take a stance. And the more polarized you are, the more attention comes to you. So I think that
Absolutely.
that also is
Absolutely.
playing into like the whole red pill phenomenon on the
Yeah.
internet.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point that you make. Not only Fresh and Fit, they're talking to the top 10%, as well as all of these figures are very polarizing. That's why they're so popular. That's why they have millions of subscribers,
Yeah.
because they're
Yeah.
polarizing. And I'm sure that they're doing a bit to some extent,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe. I mean, they're playing a character to a point.
Yeah.
I doubt they live their day-to-day life that extreme, but maybe they do. More respect if, they're more, what we see is what we get. We see that
Yeah.
sometimes. And when you step back and look at it, I agree with, they're talking to a very specific subset of people, but at the same time, they've built these empires on the backs of the average Joe that is also feeding in and feels like they're talking to me.
Yes.
Like, this
Yes.
resonates with me. And if something resonates with you, I'm not going to tell you like, hey man, you're stupid for letting that resonate with you. Like,
Right. Right.
you feel how you feel, and you're going to consume what you're going to consume.
Right. I
But
think I
even,
think you're stupid if you don't investigate why it's resonating with you. If you
very
just
much so.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
the majority of people, I don't think, do that. I think they just consume and eat it
I
and
agree.
take it face value. And, even, there's been interviews of Andrew Tate saying, like, I have dudes selling their houses trying to, learn how to subjugate, or, like, lock a bunch of women in a basement and have them do OnlyFans and make money off of it. Like,
Yeah.
because they fed my empire for that, and they've sold their houses for it. And all these average Joes are, just because it's the average person that's built these people up. And again, I don't think we should censor anybody, but at the same
Agreed.
time, because a lot of the audience, whether they mean for it to be or not, is your average person. And I think that's where we get into a gray area, and I have a lot of contention with. Again, you can't censor people. You have to let ideas
Yes.
be out there. And I like what you said earlier about, if you're not smart enough or versed enough to consume something, break it down, and then go forward, then there's a problem with education and how you were
Yes.
brought up before then.
Yes.
I agree with that. I very much do. I've gotten fights with some of my very liberal friends because I will retweet something, or, whatever you want to say. Or I have some more moderate to conservative talking points at times, and they're like, but man, it's the dangers of people consuming this and not realizing what they're consuming. They get in this headspace, and then they kind of become, how do I say it? I don't want to call them dangerous, because not everybody that consumes that is dangerous, and that's a big flashy word, but more risky with behavior people, as far as, your average guy. You talk to your average guy that makes 60K a year, and is like, well, I have to be, this is the philosophy, that this ideology I've bought into. I have to be the breadwinner. I have to do this. My wife can't have an Instagram and post our beach pictures on. And you start getting to subtle things like that, and I think it poisons the well a little bit that we're all drinking from,
I
because
agree.
that
Yeah.
guy now
Yeah.
has an
I see what you're
exorbitant
saying.
amount of unnecessary pressure on them
Right. And
to
if they don't have like
adhere.
the wherewithal to be able to investigate and unpack that within themselves, then it is going to manifest in destructive ways. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's where we get, families get destructive, and, divorce has always been a problem. Maybe not always, but so, I was born in the 90s, and it's been a big problem since before then. And we have these issues that I feel like I said, poisons the well for their average viewer. Not that that should censor them, but I think that some of these big creators either need to, I'm not going to tell them what to do, but maybe make a point to be like, hey, this is our audience. Just a disclaimer, we're not talking to the dude that makes 45, but at the same time, they are, and they're
Well,
explicit about that, while saying, hey, you're unhealthy, you're unfit, you're
yes.
not making that much money, you need to become a high value man, or you're going to live your life alone.
Right.
So because of saying that, now that you have agreed, yeah, man, I'm unhealthy, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm doing all these negative behaviors, I need to become a high value man if I want to live the life I'm making. But so many people will never take that next step. They're just going to kind of feed into those ideologies, apply them spottily, very
Yes.
spotty across
Yeah.
their life, and we get negative outcomes from
In an
that. And
irresponsible way. They're going to apply them in an irresponsible way, right? Like I know
yeah,
that when I was first getting into the red pill content, like I haven't even uttered the words red pill near my wife because it's just like no, there are certain things that it's like listen, you don't need to know everything that's going on under the hood to drive a car, right? So I don't need to explain every aspect of my behavior and my personality to my wife who's not even asking, right?
yeah,
It's just enough to know that for me to understand her behavior, why she's behaving the way that she is, and really ultimately I'm accountable for my own feelings. I'm accountable. That they're mine. I'm responsible. You know, nobody
hmm
else is responsible for the way that I feel. And so in that sense it's like ultimately empowering because there's always something that I can do to resolve whatever feeling that I have that's uncomfortable. So,
yeah. And I feel that that's a really healthy way to do it.
yes.
But kind of to tip in a little bit more, as far they talk about biology and men and women are different, which we are.
Yes.
But at the same time, a lot of our human experiences and the fact that we both feel the whole range of emotions
Mhm.
and we need to process and express those in various ways,
Yes.
you know, sometimes the ideology pushes like, though that's bad. You can't do that. Like, you even if you feel this way, you need to man up and not process that because you're being a pussy about it,
Right.
which
Which again,
which is a problem.
it's a I think it's a misinterpretation of the message. You know, partially because the people who are conveying the message are doing a pretty poor job at conveying it accurately, and partially because the people who are listening aren't doing enough on their end to engage with it to really understand what this means and how it can be applied to their lives. So I I kind of blame both parties. I think equally in this in this realm. Um, I lost the thread. Damn it!
That's all right.
I do
That's all
that
right. So
sometimes.
that's all right. So well, let's kind of push into this, you know, man versus woman thing a little bit. That is really prevalent in the red
Okay,
pill community. It
this
really
sounds like
is. So
fun.
let's push into that a little bit. Um, I feel like a lot of the talking points again, whoever they're talking to, we have the context of what we've talked up till now.
Hmm.
A lot of it is how do you feel about their kind of war between this red pill ideology and feminism, modern feminism, the one that
Hmm.
we encounter all the time? Because I know that there's a lot in that, but let's kind of start with that. How do you feel about? So I don't mean to interview you. That's not what I'm
Oh no,
trying to do.
this is fine. This is
Just trying
fine.
to.
Like
So what are your thoughts on that part of it?
my thoughts on so I don't necessarily see it so much as a war, but what I do see
Yeah.
is that the women that they interview on these shows have a very challenging time with accountability and with holding themselves accountable. And I see that over and over and over again. Um, there's even with my own wife, I see it. You know, and I'm not really sure what to make of that. Other than the fact that like, well, I'm still accountable for my life, so it actually doesn't even affect me all that much if you if you just want to live your life the way that you're living it, right? But I do see that there is like it is challenging for a lot of the women that they bring onto those shows to hold themselves accountable for the things that they did and to acknowledge that there are unflattering truths about women just as there are about men. And the whole thing isn't like actually I do kind of feel like laying all of the ills of the world at the feet of men. No, let me rephrase. Laying all of your problems, specifically your problems, at the feet of somebody else is disingenuous.
I agree with
So
that.
so to say Like, I can't get ahead because of sexism or because of patriarchy or because of this or because of that. I don't think that's a particularly helpful view for anybody. It's like those things may exist, but challenges and obstacles are always going to exist, right? And that's the whole point. Is like transcendence is really where the fulfillment in life is. And so it's like the more obstacles. I don't know why that's not better. Like, have more obstacles, because overcoming obstacles really is where you find fulfillment. It's really where self-esteem is built. It's really where you find all of the meaning and the joy and the confidence that you're after, right? So like leveling the playing field in that way, I don't think is particularly helpful, because I think men specifically, because I think this is something I will say, because I do think this. One of the things you hear on those shows a lot is that men live life on hard mode, women live life on easy mode. And to an extent, I get why they're saying it, but I would counter: women live biology on hard mode, men live biology on easy mode. So for us, specifically for men, like, because we don't bear the burden of reproduction, we have to find another way to engage with adversity, right? Because our system is ancient, and so it's built to it's built and it evolved in an environment where food was not plentiful and where survival was paramount. And now that food is plentiful and survival is pretty much guaranteed, we have to actively inject that adversity into our lives, or we feel depressed, we feel like shit, we feel disenfranchised. Whereas women still have the biological imperative. They're still straddled with that, and that no small like chunk of adversity, you know. And I think adversity is very important for everybody.
Yeah, I
So I will
agree.
say
I agree. I
that.
definitely think because we live in a soft time
Yes.
overall.
Yes.
Life's if I could pick any day to live in the world in history, it's right now.
Oh, for sure.
100%.
For
No
sure.
questions asked. Yeah.
Yo,
Why would
ChatGPT
I?
4 is live, man. Like, come on.
Bro, I don't even have to do my homework. Like, yeah, but I agree. I think that part of the issue with kind of we'll start with why I think a lot of men feel so lost and aimless is because there isn't a war to fight,
Mm,
there isn't a field to plow,
yep.
there isn't you don't have if you don't catch something on your hunt, then you don't eat. We're not in that
Yeah.
time anymore. So
Yeah.
life's easier, and I can see because of very much looking at this in a historical context. Before it made you can say it made sense that gender roles were very locked in,
Mm,
and now that we are in a place now, because I mean women couldn't get a credit card on their own till like 74 is
mm,
well I think 69 was when they could, but a lot of banks wouldn't give it to them. 74 Congress passes the uh, Equal Credit Opportunity Act, and now
mm,
women can apply, and banks have to give them that if they, their credit's good,
mm,
the things we all have to go through. And so it feels recent. It's more recent, I think people look at that these gender fluid roles that we live in today are more regular and what we all have to live in a little bit more than previous generations. And we were
mm,
all raised by generations that still come from that much stricter, men do this, women do that, and anything that crosses those boundaries is abnormal or deviant,
mm,
or oh, I don't like that because I've never seen that before.
mm,
So I think part of it is we're recovering, and I think as men specifically we have to figure out what to do with our lives now more than ever, because
mm,
before it was you enlist, you go to work in the factory, you do your job, because you're the only one that can go out and do those things, because women, it's not like women were lawyers and
mm.
accountants, and they didn't have those opportunities before, so men had to,
Right.
period. So it set up a society that was built on on one view of social roles in this time, and in our history, it was built that way. And as we are moving past that time where now life is easier, we all have opportunity. Anyone can be anything they want as long
Mm-hmm.
as they put in the work and
Mm-hmm.
develop themselves and achieve and going out and do the work to achieve their goals.
Mm-hmm.
Now men feel like almost like I think that some men feel like their life purpose that they were set and that their parents were raised on and all these signals they got from an early age now don't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And now men feel lost and
Yes.
depressed. They can't do this. Women aren't, before, since women couldn't work, marriage was your option. You want a house, you want nice things, you want this, you have to get married because men are the only ones that can do these tasks.
Mm.
And I think that part of it is we're kind of still reeling from that, but I feel like there is a lot of pushback as far as people saying, well, I don't like how we're living now. This isn't good. We need to return to those more traditional values
Mm.
of the before time. And it just feels to me sometimes that a lot of these, talking points we get where women are biologically, they need to be the ones that raise the kids. They're the homemakers. They're more
Mm.
organized. They're da 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 da. All these different verbs that we have historically in America bestowed upon women to do, now we don't have to do that anymore.
Right.
And I think that it feels like we're trying to, with some of these rhetoric and this talking points, rhetoric's an egregious word, but these
Mm.
talking points kind of are trying to push back against the reality of today. And I think that is what rubs me the wrong way with a lot of the talking points that we get because of that. And just to hit on feminism real quick, there is a very bastardized version of feminism that is floating around now.
Mm.
Absolutely. It shouldn't,
I
so
agree.
many big talking points in that sphere are very much men suck,
Mm.
fuck you guys, it's our turn now.
Yeah.
And really feminism is about, hey, we're need to be equal.
Yeah.
We just want the same opportunities without being held back, but women are still held back because of this history and this society that we've built until then.
So
How you said you don't like how women were blaming men for the problem, and blame is, I mean, it definitely happens, but that's how we're reeling from these past generations where men created these systems because they were the only ones that could work. They were the only things. And now we're just living in a transitional time right now. And I hate to see the backsliding with things like that.
let me ask you, in what ways do you think women are still being held back?
Okay. Um, just our, kind of like I said, our parents had much more traditional gender roles. I don't know if my dad
Mine
could change
didn't.
a diaper.
Mine didn't, and that's a point. But that's a yeah, yeah.
Especially our grandparents, I guess. Let's say
Mm.
we'll space it out. Like our grandparents, there's probably a lot of grandfathers out there that have never changed a diaper in their life, which is
Yeah.
crazy to me because they're your kids. You hear a
Right.
lot of like older people will tell younger fathers. I'm sure you've heard this, and it drives me fucking crazy. Like, oh, you decided to give your wife a day off and babysit your kids.
Yeah.
No,
Oh,
no, no,
it's.
no, no, no.
I'm a.
I am
I'm a
parenting.
parent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I go to the doctor's appointments. We
Yeah.
50-50 it. Like, do not tell me I am babysitting my children.
This is
That is
my child.
egregious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
So
Completely agree.
we're not very removed from a lot of those ideals. And a lot of older people, I mean, look at the age of Congress. Like, a lot of the people that are making decisions are in that generation where, their norm were those older, more traditional social roles. There's and I think that bleeds in. That's kind of the base for what kind of bleeds in why I think women still have some disadvantages that men don't in the world. Not that, and this is a very generalized statement because that's not, like, as someone who's worked in social work and healthcare, I am the lone man among women
Yep.
many, many times.
Yep. I know what you mean because I was in the same field. So yeah.
Okay, so yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah. So you understand. And we see it in our words that we use. Um, we call, like, especially growing up, like, if you did anything that wasn't, masculine, like, oh, what are you, gay?
Hmm.
Like, or, men calling other men, like, oh, don't be a pussy, man, just do it.
Hmm.
Like, don't be a bitch. And so we look at those words like, what's that saying? So if I'm calling you a pussy, I'm saying you are not equal to me as a man because I think I'm a man, I'm calling you the pussy.
Mm.
So, that's a woman term. So we're saying that if you're a pussy, you are less than me, a man. So just even in our language
Okay.
that's been built over time,
I
it
see.
it, it kind of sets that stratification of one is the other. And so things like that we've just built up, we're still trying to reel away from a lot of those old pressed in gender and social roles, and I think that the remnants of that are still holding us back. Or same with how with African Americans in America, like yeah, they're slavery is obviously not a thing anymore,
Mm.
you know, but the fact that once they got free, they a lot were relegated to poor things, poor places to live.
Mm.
The standards were not equal, and obviously through time this has gotten significantly better. Like, but and as someone who went into a lot of lower socioeconomic houses, um, black, white, we've been in all of them.
Mm.
All the whole spectrum you see, and everyone struggles the same.
Yeah.
Um, but we have to admit that there is still some racism out there from the old world that still hangs over, I think, a lot of African Americans today. And I think it's a parallel to that with women and how they've gotten their rights, where there's still that overhang from these older times that still kind of keep them down. I know one more term and then I'll stop for a second.
Mm.
So we've all heard of like the glass ceiling, right?
Mm.
So there's another term in sociology. It's called the glass escalator or the glass elevator. So basically, I'm in nursing,
Mm.
right? Um, Whenever it's time for a promotion or if I want to move around along the hierarchy, a lot of times women will get suggested for different roles where, oh, you're a man. We associate leader with men. A lot of
Mm.
times we'll hear like organizer with women. So
Mm.
men, he's a leader. Let's push him more this way. So it's almost easier because I'm the only man in a woman's field. So
Mm.
it's like, oh, so you're a man, you're a leader. We're going to push you up in this way. If you're a woman, we might push you up, but we're going to push you this way. So it still kind of stratifies that line just because of all these, words and preconceived notions that have been so ingrained in our society that we're still trying to dig ourselves out, and it takes generations to do it. It's not going to be overnight. The people, especially, on the left that think like we're going to turn the page tomorrow, it's not realistic. It's going to
Mm.
take generations in order for us to fully get to a equalized society. So, yeah.
So I mean, I hear what you're saying. I want to make the point though that my main issue with the left is that their answer is always to consolidate power in the hands of the state. And it baffles my mind. I don't understand how giving power to old rich white men is going to solve the problems that you're saying were created by the same old rich white men. And it's like there's I don't know if there's a bigger example of cognitive dissonance than that. It's like, so that's my biggest contention with the left right now is that that's their solution to everything is enforce it through policy.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that, again, before we make judgments about, like, because I haven't worked in the same fields that you've worked in. Like, we haven't worked together. I don't know what your experiences are, right? But I've seen on more than one occasion specifically a woman try to convey an idea to somebody and be ignored, and then afterwards make a comment about that being either misogynistic or like an aspect of the patriarchy or something like that, when really what it was poor communication on her part, because she didn't have anybody's attention. She had nobody's attention when she said that thing. But
Mm-hmm.
and she didn't take the time to make sure that like, so this is the thing. It's like, if you want to convey an idea to somebody, number one is you have to have their attention. If they're not listening, they're not going to hear you, right? And it seems like, and this isn't just like specific to women, right? I've seen this with hundreds, thousands of people who just don't understand like the basic premise that you have to have somebody's attention in order to communicate with them. But what I see with with women, it tends to be, when it happens, they didn't listen to me because I'm a woman. With men, it's more, nobody listens to me, I'm a piece of shit. So, I think that it's hard to say, because obviously I'm not a woman. So, to speak on what it's like to be a woman is out of character for me. I'm just not going to do that. But I can speak about the things that I've seen and the things that I've experienced. And one of the biggest things is the fact that we don't communicate effectively all of the time, right? Nobody does. None of us communicate effectively all of the time. But there's a significant portion of us who don't even bother to make sure that like they have solid footing before they attempt to convey something to somebody else. And then because of that, rather than look at themselves and say, well, what did I do wrong in that scenario? Why didn't they listen to me? They automatically jump to, oh, it's because nobody wants to listen to me because I'm just a piece of shit man. Or nobody wants to, or, it's because I'm a woman that they're not listening to me. Right.
There's no accountability for what did I maybe do wrong for you to not listen to me.
Exactly.
I agree.
Exactly.
And that bastardization of feminism that I think is probably more rampant than like what it actually means to like just want to be equal. It seeps in a lot of things, and it's kind of the same with, it's kind of that liberal yelling talking point on that side that counteracts, pick your poison or pick your whatever you want on the loud, angry, conservative talking point. And I agree. I think a lot of people get into this set mindset of this is why this happened, period. It wasn't because I didn't have their attention, because I see that too. Yeah. I've seen that exact scenario too.
Yeah. Happens a lot.
And and just being able to look at that nuance a little bit and maybe like, okay, so it's because of this, but like instead of looking at it like that, like, okay, so what do I need to do better next time to communicate my views better? Yes. Which is a question that we just do not ask ourselves near enough.
Yeah.
No one does. Man, woman, wild, doesn't matter.
Mm. It's like, I'll never forget this. I was working in the prison as a substance abuse counselor, and I could go on about what that was like, but the curriculum that we were working with was just it was grotesque in my mind. I'm like, what are we even doing with this? And so I was having a conversation with the master trainer of the state and the regional director of the state of the company about the content and about what we could do to change it. And there was a lot of like the conversations to me felt like it was going in a really good direction. And then a couple of weeks went by, and I made a comment to the rest of my team that like, they still haven't gotten back to me about that. Like, what's going on there? They said they would get back to me. And then I reached back out to them, and they still haven't gotten back to me. And one of my coworkers was like, she was like, it's probably because your skin isn't the right color. Like, she straight up said that to me. And it was just like, it shocked me because it was so far out of the realm of like how I process things. First of all, she was saying that because I'm not black, they weren't going to listen to me. And I think that really just put all of her issues. It was like one of those moments where she just like exposed her own prejudices, like by trying to project them onto me. But also it was just really kind of interesting again, because it's like there are people who think that way. There are people who think that
Yeah.
way and feel that way. And it's like, for me, I think being naive is one of my shortcomings, because I tend to be idealistic, and I tend to be, assume the best in people. And so when I'm hit with something like that, where somebody just so like casually, like with their whole chest is like, oh, it's, probably because you're not the right color. Like, oh my God, what kind of world is this? Like, what is happening where we can't even look at our own actions first? Like, we
Hmm.
automatically have to jump right to, it's my skin color or my gender or my background. Like, no, no, no. There's so much shit that I could fix first before I could even consider that as a possibility. Why don't we focus on that? Because I actually have
Hmm.
control over that.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's a good point. And just how I feel there are talking points that red pillars poison the well with. There is
mm,
the exact same thing on the other side. No,
mm,
neither of these extremes. Red pill, blue pill, black pill, orange, whatever other
yeah,
colors there are out there. Who knows? Um, but a lot of time, obviously it's so much of it's for clicks and it's for
yeah,
extreme views and all that. But because so many people have kind of brought that into their being and taken it face value, it just kind of poisons the well, and you get situations, yeah, like that, where it's not about like how can we as a whole move forward, how can we
mm,
all be better and all stand in the sun. It's about, well, this is why I can't stand in the sun.
right, right,
And it's that selfishness that a
yeah,
lot of a lot of people all go back to, and not that it's not rooted maybe in something that is an issue in society, but we have to kind of look at these other things first. And I really appreciate how you've been real hard on that personal accountability.
absolutely,
And
yeah,
what does that, what can I be accountable first before I go off and do that? Not that there aren't injustices, but there have always been injustices, and there will always be injustices.
agreed,
And
yeah.
it's all of our, as humans, because we're all,
And
I'm team
that's
human.
not a free pass for injustice, by the way. It's not
No,
a free
no, no,
pass.
no, no, no.
What it is, what I'm saying is, I know that I don't have the requisite education to be able to propose a solution to the thing, right? But
Absolutely, yeah,
I do know that I can start with me. I do know that.
yeah. No, I think that's a great point, because we as individuals have to all be better if we're ever going to move forward
Mm,
and live in a more ideal society. And that also kind of, that's hard to say, because what is ideal? Ideal for
mm.
one person's way different than the other. So, but I would hope that everybody wants everyone to be in a better spot, because if not, I mean, there's obviously some people that don't, because yeah, but
Yeah,
it's tough. It's a tough. It's very convoluted, all of it, and you know it's hard. But
yeah.
again, that's why conversations that we're currently having right now are important.
Mm.
I think, because you know you're not screaming at me, I'm not screaming
Yeah,
at you.
yeah.
We both agree with the other person on various points, but
But we do
and
have some. I think
express
we have
where we
some.
disagree.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Hmm.
and I agree. I think that it's really important to be able to have discussions like this, because I don't think it's contentious to say that, yes, there are all kinds of ills in the world, but there's always something that you could focus on with you to improve your situation, right? And the thing I think that people miss a lot of the times too is that you're just because your environmental situation improves, that doesn't mean your mental or emotional situation is going to improve, right? It might
Hmm.
relieve stress in the short term, but there's a curious thing, you being a social worker, I'm sure you've seen it too, where it's like, if you take away stress from somebody but haven't addressed the core issue, they'll find some other stress to fill that void almost immediately,
Hmm.
almost immediately. And so it's
Yeah.
like, I realized pretty early on in this, it's like, yo, we don't understand behavior at all. Like, I had a woman who had been homeless for 20 years. Homeless for 20 years. We were on the verge of getting her own place, and because she couldn't have some man come down and stay the night with her, she rejected the whole thing. And it's like,
There's a
it's just
sorry, go ahead.
it blew my mind because it's like you've been on the street for 20 years and now you have an opportunity for your own place to live, and you are going to reject that because one of the rules is you can't have males sleep over in this room, in this apartment.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there is, I've heard before, I don't know if it's a social concept, might be a psych concept, somewhere in the middle, the lines blur a little
Yeah.
bit, um, about people who live and are brought up and exist in chaos.
Mm.
That is their normal.
Yes.
And when there is an opportunity to be normal, they default back to the chaos they've been living in because that's what they're comfortable with.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I think that
Yep.
speaks more to just the general mental health crisis that America has in general, and just,
100%.
poor access
100%.
to mental health care, and insurances really don't cover it. And
Well, I mean,
never mind if you have insurance. If you don't, and even if you do, oh yeah, I'm having a crisis. Let's say I'm having a crisis right now. I need to see someone. We'll pencil you in 4 months.
yeah.
Okay,
And
well, I'll deal with it.
the in addition to that, it's like because none of us really understand behavior. Like it's staggering how few people actually understand behavior. That the prescriptions that are offered are like 90% of them are pharmaceutical. So 90% of our approach to dealing with mental illness is pharmaceutical. It's, the newest drug or the newest, IM shot or whatever it is. It's never a radical reevaluation of the fundamental axioms that we're using to guide ourselves to being able to facilitate change in somebody else. Right. It's never that. Again, and it goes back to the accountability thing too. It's never like, oh, I'm not helping this person because I haven't figured out a way to reach them. It's, oh, this person, I'm not helping this person because they're not on the right drug. So they have to get on the right drug before I can help them.
Yeah. Why do you think people have such a problem with that, with like even just doing therapy or with looking inside and being like, man, I have negative behaviors I need to change? Why do you think that so many people have problems doing that?
A couple of reasons. I think habit, to be honest with you, is a big one. I think you get into a pattern of behavior where you constantly pass the buck, right? Because everybody else around you is doing the same thing. And so if it's what your parents are doing, or if it's what your brothers and sisters are doing, or your peer group is doing, then that's also what you're going to do. And if you've been doing that 10, 20, 30 years, that is your immediate response to things. And because you've been doing it for so long, because it's your immediate response to things, it's reflexive in that way. And so you almost don't even realize that it's happening. And so at a certain point too, and this is important to note, it somehow ties into your identity, right? Ultimately, and I'm thinking about writing a book about this, but ultimately, identity is our fundamental issue. Identity is our fundamental issue. But so if you think that, say, I don't know, you're a kid and you go to the store and one of your friends like peer pressures you into stealing a candy bar and you get caught, right? Most kids would say, "Oh, he made me do it. He made me do it. That's why I did it. He made me do it," right? So there's that immediate reflexive avoidance of accountability for the part that you played, and that kind of epitomizes the whole thing. But I think the reason that we do that, the reason to begin with that we say he's the one who made me do it, is because something in our identity says, if I admit that I am responsible, then some piece of me is dying. some piece of me dies. And so it represents really what it is it's a metaphorical death, right? Because to say that yes, I did that, you have to take responsibility, and so you have to allow the part of yourself that was coerced to be annihilated, right? Hopefully that's what happens, because if this thing is influencing your behavior, then it's not serving you, and so it should hopefully in a, like, if you process the whole thing in a healthy way, that piece of you evaporates, right? Ultimately, maybe not right away, but through the process, it will. But that's very scary to, again, on like a reflexive level. It's very scary to have a piece of your identity sort of called out for execution. And so that is a big reason why I think people don't look internally into themselves, because it's a metaphorical death, but it represents a literal death to the ego, because the ego is what identifies that, like, oh, this thing is me. This thing is me. Oh, and you want to take a piece of that. No, that's mine. He made me do it. He did it. And so in that way, it's a defense mechanism that protects you from what feels like a literal death. Mm-hmm. And I think that is rampant with particularly people in our culture.
I like that. That's good. That's good. Yeah. So how do we solve these problems, right? Is that where we go next? How do we solve these problems? Or
yeah.
You know, like I know earlier you mentioned, which I think we can kind of circle back and flesh this out a little bit, is that when people want problems solved, a lot of times, especially the left wants to, well, it's the government's responsibility. Like, so,
yeah,
which I very much feel like it is, the family unit is the most important unit there is.
I like that.
That's where you.
I haven't always felt that way, but since having kids, I've definitely come around to that idea. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that, the importance of not only, I think waiting to have kids is one of the best things that people can do. I'm not going to judge if people have kids
specifically for
early.
Men, I would say, because I think we need a little bit more time to mature. But yeah,
let the ponies gallop and then settle down. Yeah, absolutely. And just because parents have to educate their kids first and foremost, and they're the ones that model the behaviors.
Yes.
And do all this, and I know a lot of, you hear sometimes like, oh, well, don't cry or apologize to your kids. Like, you have to be the right one. And like, I think that is so ridiculous.
That's damaging.
Like, I want my daughter to grow up, and my son, I want them to grow up to know that it's okay that, men, women, anyone can make mistakes, and it's better to own up to it. Everybody has emotions, and it's okay to express it. I know, one talking point you hear a lot is like, oh, these overly emotional men that want to cry all the time. Like, how minuscule the population that is, and I think some people take that to heart, like, well, we got to be stoic 100%.
Oh, you can never cry.
You can never, you can't. No, it's like, no. It's important to cry. I mean, I've cried in front of my friends. Like, that's what they're there for. These are what you build these close bonds for. And, kind of to piggyback, I think that an emphasis on building those close bonds with other humans, whether it's, you and the boys, her and the girls, like, it's so important to have those outlets outside of the family structure to also vent and to do that and to check you, like if I'm ranting to my friend and it's like, so I just yelled at this, I just yelled all about this and stuff. And like, I hope that they're like, hey man, you probably shouldn't do that, dude. Like that's on you.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, now I have it's a safe space for me to reflect and for someone I trust to challenge me a little bit. And, I think that those kind of bonds we make, whether it's, just the family bonds and also the, close friends bonds, I think those are a really important thing that I don't think is talked about enough.
Yeah.
I don't think the importance of the family structure is talked about enough, whatever that structure looks like. Having two loving parents there is imperative. Yeah. And for both those parents to understand what they can and can't give to their child as far as lessons and, you know, emotional wisdom to impart on them. And I think
Mm,
if we would do better about raising emotionally complete children, boys and girls, then some of these issues that we've talked about so far, and especially your really good example you just put about the, the kids stealing and all that. And it's like,
mm,
oh, part of me's thing, like, and, habit forming and all that. Like, I think if we would put a more emphasis on supporting families,
mm,
then we could build a better society as a whole, because it
mm,
starts there. Whether you
mm.
love the public school
Yeah,
system or not, it starts at home.
absolutely. Absolutely agree. Hmm.
Which is, it's horrible that the divorce rate's still, 35 to 50% is what the US Census says, which I
Yeah,
wonder, I don't know how it's arranged, but
yeah.
somewhere in there. We'll call it 40, which is sad. It's really sad. And obviously, there's a lot of various reasons to do it. And
I think the
um,
marriage rate's dropping too, right? It's not just the divorce rate, but the marriage rate is also dropping.
yeah, it's dropping and going and getting later, which is
Which
both good things.
again, I wonder about that too. Like, I didn't even think about it until after I got married. It's like, why did I involve the state in this? That seems very weird to me.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I don't understand the reason for it.
Well, they get better taxes.
That's what they say, but I haven't seen it.
All right. Child tax credit, I guess. I don't know. I
Hmm.
guess the only one of you got to file to get that, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's
It,
interesting how we've given up so much control of some of
yeah.
these basic institutions that
Yeah.
the government really shouldn't be in at all. And then now that we've given up control of them, then it's like, hey, well, why can't two men or two women raise a child and adopt? It's like, well,
Right.
the state says you can't. It's like that's
Okay.
silly.
And
Like
that's
we're
it's
raging
asinine. Yeah.
against,
Yeah.
but we're inviting them in, and that's a huge problem,
Mm.
which I don't think enough people see on either side of the aisle. Um, you know, with left, you want people, oh yeah, come into my house, government.
Yeah.
Take what you want, do what you need to do, and then the right's like, oh, we just two men shouldn't be sleeping together because I'm in their bedroom now. Like, no, no, no,
Yeah.
everyone stay out of each other's bedrooms.
Yeah.
Like, it's not your
Yes.
business, not your
Yeah.
business how I parent my children, unless I
Right.
am beating them. You get out of my life. Like,
Right.
and interesting, that we're back and forth on that with the government stuff. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Any other spicy topics you want to bring up while we're here?
Um, how are we on time?
We're right at about hour 15. I don't know how long your pods normally go. So if you need to,
hour and a half, maybe 2 hours usually.
okay,
So I think I mean I want to keep talking though. That's the problem. That's the problem. But my wife and kids just walked in the door. I heard them just walk in,
that's fair.
and I have some other things that I need to take care of today. So unfortunately, I think we're gonna have to go ahead and end this discussion here. We'll table it for later because this was a lot of fun.
Absolutely,
I've been
man.
trying to figure out a way how to talk about like the red pill stuff on the channel organically. So this is a really good way. So definitely enjoyed the conversation, and
100%.
would love to have you on again.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. Yeah, I'm happy to get into it. So I
yeah,
appreciate you having me on.
yeah,
Thank you
absolutely.
for hosting. And yeah, I mean, you ever want to do it again, just reach out for me. I'm
Yeah,
always here. All right.
definitely. All right,
All right, brother. Take it easy.
you too.